Hello everyone. Today I'll continue telling the story of the single mother, Diệu. I hope you enjoy watching the video. That afternoon the sky turned a murky gray, as if forewarning something ominous. Han was bent over feeding the chickens when her phone suddenly vibrated. Seeing the name on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. A hurried voice came through the line. Hân, Tan has been in a serious accident. The word struck like an icy blade straight to her heart. Her hands trembled, nearly dropping the phone. She stammered, her voice choked. What did you say? Tan, what happened to him? The caller tried to calm her, but words like injury, critical, in emergency care kept drilling into her mind. All the sounds around her seemed to vanish, leaving only the pounding of her heartbeat and her own labored breaths. Hot tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. She collapsed onto the doorstep, clutching her chest as if to hold together something shattering inside. Since the day she met Tan, she had never felt so terrified of losing him. Images of his gentle smile, his patient way of sweeping the yard, feeding the chickens, playing with little Tom flashed in her mind. Tom, please don't leave me, she whispered, her voice breaking into sobs. She hastily wiped her tears, forcing herself to stand. Her legs shook, but her eyes had gained a fierce resolve. No matter how far the hospital was, no matter how chaotic her heart felt, she knew only one thing. She had to get to him immediately. Han's motorbike tore through the wind, its wheels bouncing over the pothole-ridden road. Yet she felt nothing but the rush of air in her ears and the pounding of her heart. With every second that passed, she imagined Tan. His face contorted in pain, his eyes growing dim. The thought tightened her throat, and tears welled up, spilling over and leaving a salty trace on her lips. When the hospital finally came into view, she all but jumped off the bike, feet hitting the ground as she bolted inside. The sharp scent of antiseptic hit her, but she paid no mind. Her hurried footsteps echoed down the long hallway, blending with the blare of emergency announcements and the metallic rattle of a stretcher's wheels. Then she saw him. Tan lay on the gurney, his clothes stained with dirt and blood, a white bandage wrapped around his forehead, his face pale as paper. A nurse was pushing him toward the emergency room, flanked by two doctors exchanging urgent words about his injuries. Tan! Han cried out, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with panic. But the yard doors slammed shut before her, cutting her off. She pounded on them with her fists, sobbing, her icy fingers gripping the cold steel frame. All she could do was stand there, staring through the small glass window at the still figure under the harsh white lights. In that moment, Han realized just how terrified she was of losing him. Every hesitation, every wall she had built between them crumbled to nothing. She was left with only one desperate wish, that Tan would open his eyes, smile at her, and say, just as he always did, "I'm here. Don't worry anymore." Time in the hospital corridor seemed to crawl, each second suffocating. Han leaned against the wall, her fingers clutching the hem of her shirt, eyes fixed on the emergency room door. Every time she heard footsteps or the sound of it opening, her heart would leap, only to sink again when it was just another medical staff passing by. She tried to take deep breaths, but her chest felt constricted. The ticking of the wall clock echoed sharply in the stillness. With each passing minute, the weight of worry pressed harder on her, making her legs tremble as if they could no longer hold her up. Then the door swung open. A doctor stepped out, beads of sweat still on his forehead, his mask covering half his face. His gaze found hers. "Are you the patient Tana's family?" Han nodded rapidly, her voice trembling. "Yes, how is he?" The doctor hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low, steady tone. "He suffered significant soft tissue injuries and lost a lot of blood, but fortunately, there's no damage to the skull. We've stopped the bleeding and started fluids. However, he's still weak and there's a risk of traumatic shock, so we'll need to keep monitoring him." At the words, "no damage to the skull," Han's shoulders quivered and tears welled up again, this time from relief. She collapsed onto the nearest chair, gasping for breath, covering her face as if all the pressure she'd been holding back was finally pouring out with those hot tears. The doctor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his voice softening. "Don't worry. We'll do everything we can to get him through this. Right now he needs complete rest. Once he wakes up you can go in and see him." Han nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the emergency room door as it slowly swung shut. Deep inside, an unspoken promise formed. "As long as you come back to me, I will never let you go again." An hour later, a nurse signaled that Han could go in. She stepped inside, each movement slow, as if even the sound of her footsteps might disturb the fragile stillness in the room. The walls were stark white, the lighting softer than in the hallway, and the scent of antiseptic still lingered thick in the air. Han lay there, motionless against the white sheets, his face pale, lips slightly parted but drained of all strength. Beside him, the 4 dripped steadily, and the heart monitor flashed cold green numbers. Han pulled a chair close to the bed, her trembling fingers searching for his hand. Cold. She gripped it tightly, as if she could pour all her warmth and strength into him. Her eyes were rimmed with red, lashes heavy with tears, yet she never once looked away from his face. "Tan, you scared me so much." Her voice cracked, breaking into quiet sobs. He didn't answer. Only the slow, steady beeps of the heart monitor and the faint rise and fall of his chest filled the room. Han leaned forward, resting her forehead against his hand, letting her hot tears seep into his chilled skin. I've been meaning to tell you this for a long time," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm afraid that if I don't say it now I might never get the chance. I like you. Not just because you've been kind to Tom, but because you walked into my life and showed me I don't have to fight alone anymore." She knew he couldn't hear her, and if he could, he might not be able to answer. But still she spoke, as if sending a promise into the space between them. Then she gently placed his hand against her cheek, closing her eyes to feel whatever warmth was left, as if holding on, unwilling to let go, even for a single heartbeat. Han remained there, his hand pressed to her cheek, eyes closed as she tried to absorb every last trace of fragile warmth. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the air, like the heartbeat of a delicate hope. Then in the stillness she felt it, something faint like a spark of current passing through. Tana's hand shifted slightly, his fingers trembling as they closed weakly around hers. Han's eyes flew open, her heart skipping a beat. "Tan?" Her voice trembled, barely more than a breath. His fingers twitched again, ever so faintly, but enough to make her eyes widen as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. She gripped his hand tighter, pressing her face against it, whispering as if afraid to break the fragile moment. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Can you hear me?" Outside, the afternoon sunlight slanted through the window, spilling into the white hospital room, casting a glow over their clasped hands. And in that small world within 4 hospital walls, a spark of hope had been lit, fragile, yet enough to anchor Han's belief that he would come back, open his eyes and call her name. As Han was still trembling with joy, the door to the room opened quietly. The on-duty doctor entered with a nurse, a patient chart in hand. Han immediately looked up, her eyes full of anticipation. "Doctor," his hand just moved. Her voice was urgent, yet laced with a fragile hope. The doctor stepped closer, observing Tan for a moment before taking his wrist to check for reflexes. After a few seconds, he gave a small nod, his deep voice carrying a note of relief. "This is a good sign. The patient's body is beginning to respond. However," he paused, meeting Han's gaze, "he is still in a deep coma. We need to keep monitoring him closely and ensure his vitals remain stable before we can talk about full consciousness." Han nodded over and over, but in her heart, a small flame of hope had already been lit. She turned back, gripping Tana's hand even tighter, whispering as if making a vow. "You hear that? You have to keep fighting. Just a little longer." I'll be here waiting for you to open your eyes." The doctor gave a few more instructions before leaving the room. The sound of the door closing left behind a silence filled with anticipation. Sunlight from the window fell across Tana's face, and Han felt certain that, though the road ahead was still long, he would return to her. Night fell, and the hospital corridor grew so still that even the wind whistling through the door crack could be heard. The warm yellow light cast a soft glow over the bed where Tan lay, stretching Han's shadow long across the tiled floor. She pulled her chair closer, holding his hand as if letting go might mean losing him forever. Outside, a light drizzle tapped gently against the window frame. Han stroked his hand and began to speak, her voice slow and trembling. "You know, in the days you've been here, the garden at my house has grown another row of vegetables. Tom keeps asking, 'Where's Uncle Tan?' I told him you were busy with work, but the truth is, I'm afraid that if he knew you were in the hospital, he'd worry as much as I am now." She paused, her voice catching, then gave a small smile, though her eyes carried a deep sadness. "I still remember that morning. You said you'd stop by to bring me some rice and eggs." And then, her words broke off in a long sigh. Han lowered her head, resting her forehead against his hand, and continued to whisper, "Tan, you have to wake up soon. There's still so much I haven't told you. I haven't finished telling you about my childhood. I haven't let you taste the cakes I baked. And I haven't heard you say you'll stay with me and my child." Outside, the street lamp's dim golden glow spilled into the window frame. In the quiet room, only the steady beeps of the heart monitor, the distant sound of rain, and Han's voice, soft as a lullaby, filled the air. That night, Han didn't close her eyes once. She sat there, holding his hand tightly, speaking and repeating the same words over and over. "I'll wait for you no matter how long it takes." The first light of dawn slipped through the hospital window, gently spilling into the room. Han was still sitting by the bed, her eyes heavy from a sleepless night, yet her hand remained firmly clasped around Tana's, as if she had never let go. Birdsong drifted faintly from afar, mingling with the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Han leaned down, her voice soft like a morning whisper. "Tan, wake up. The weather's so beautiful today." The hand beneath her suddenly moved ever so slightly. Han's heart jolted, pounding in her chest. She looked up, her eyes wide, fixed on his face. Then the eyelids that had been closed for days fluttered, and slowly opened. The morning light reflected in eyes still clouded with weakness, but when they found Han, a faint warmth flickered within them. His voice was hoarse and fragile, barely more than a breath. "Hun." Tears spilled instantly down her cheeks, not from fear this time but from overwhelming relief. She bent closer, gripping his hand tighter, smiling through the blur of her tears. "I'm here. I'm right here. You scared me half to death." Tan managed a weak smile. It was only the smallest movement, but to Han it was proof that he had come back, and perhaps he had heard the words she'd spoken to him during those long nights of his coma. Outside the window, sunlight poured gold over the hospital garden, as if a new beginning was unfolding for them both. Before Han could say another word, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. The door opened gently, and Chi-men stepped in with a bright smile, holding Tom by the hand. The moment he saw his mother, the little boy let go of her and ran straight to the hospital bed. "Mommy! Uncle Tan!" Tom's voice rang out, clear and bright, tinged with both joy and emotion. Han opened her arms, pulling him into a tight embrace. He buried his face in her shoulder for a moment before quickly looking up at Tan. "Uncle, you're awake?" Tan gave a faint nod, his smile weak but his eyes warm. He reached out with a slightly trembling hand to gently ruffle Tom's hair. "Yes, I'm awake." Chi-men set a basket of fruit on the table and said softly to Han, "Seeing him awake is such a relief. Everyone in the neighborhood was worried. Now you just focus on taking care of him here, and I'll handle everything at home." Han turned to her, eyes glistening. "Thank you so much." That day, the hospital room felt unusually warm. Tom sat at the edge of the bed, chattering away to Ton about the past few days, while Han stayed close, still holding Tana's hand, her eyes unable to hide their happiness. Outside the window, the morning sun spilled in, and a gentle breeze swayed the bougainvillea branches in the courtyard. In that moment, the three of them knew, even without blood ties, they had truly found a home of their own. A week later, after his health indicators had stabilized, the doctor allowed Ton to be discharged from the hospital. That morning, the sky was clear and blue, with soft sunlight filtering through the trees in the hospital yard. Han supported Ton step by step toward the gate, one of his arms still wrapped in bandages, but the smile had already returned to his face. On the way home, they didn't talk much, letting the wind slip into the spaces between their silences. When they reached home, Tom came running from afar, throwing his arms around Ton and chattering away about every little thing that had happened while he was gone. Ton bent down to ruffle the boy's hair, his eyes gentler than ever. When Tom ran into the house to tell Chi-men the news, Han and Ton stayed behind on the porch. Han held his hand tightly, hesitated for a moment, then looked straight into his eyes. "Ton, I've been wanting to say this for a long time. Thank you for everything. You were there when I was at my weakest, caring for me and my child like we were your own family. I know I'm not perfect and my past isn't pretty, but I truly want to keep you here with me and my child if you're willing." Ton gave her hand a gentle squeeze, his eyes lighting up with sincerity. "I've been waiting for those words for a long time. Han, I promise I'll never leave you and your child alone again." Han smiled, but her eyes were already brimming with tears. On the small porch in the morning light, their hands clasped together, a silent promise for hopeful days to come. That afternoon, Han's kitchen was livelier than ever. Chi-men brought over a basket of freshly picked vegetables, while Tom scurried about, sometimes carrying bowls, other times running to the garden to pluck a few sprigs of fresh herbs. Even with his arms still in bandages, Ton insisted on helping Han pick vegetables and peel potatoes, occasionally teasing Tom and making the boy burst into giggles. The meal was simple but full of love. A steaming bowl of sweet leaf soup, a fragrant dish of braised fish, and some boiled greens with chili fish sauce. When everything was set on the table, the three of them sat together around the old wooden table, their voices and laughter mingling with the aroma of freshly cooked rice. "Come on everyone, let's eat." Tom beamed, his voice clear and bright. Han looked at the two men beside her, a rare sense of peace swelling in her heart. She picked a piece of fish for Ton. He smiled softly, his eyes saying more than words ever could. The meal was filled with lively chatter, the clink of chopsticks and bowls, and bursts of laughter. Outside on the porch, the afternoon sun spread a golden hue across the yard, and the bougainvillea branches swayed gently in the breeze. In that moment, Han realized, happiness doesn't always come from grand gestures, but from simply sharing a meal together, knowing the one you love is here, and that tomorrow you'll wake up under the same roof again.
Xin chào mọi người, lại là mình đây, rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video của mình. Vậy là hành trình của người mẹ đơn thân ngày càng dài, những khó khăn, những vất vả cô phải trải qua rất là nhiều, nhưng cuộc sống sẽ dần tươi đẹp hơn. Rất mong mọi người ủng hộ những video tiếp theo về cuộc hành trình của người mẹ đơn thân này. Và để mình có động lực làm video, thay đổi những video hay và hấp dẫn hơn, mọi người nhớ để lại nhận xét ở dưới phần bình luận giúp mình nha. Và đặc biệt mọi người nhớ like, share, bật chuông thông báo khi nhận thông báo những video mới nhất. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video của mình, rất mong được mọi người ủng hộ kênh của mình. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại mọi người nha.